everybody, this is Rob with Veracity. This is kind of a follow-up to our last video on how to use our dashboard analytics platform. This is the kind of graph and chart system that comes embedded into the LRSs that you allocate with the Veracity LRS system. So what I'm going to show you guys today is using the custom dashboards. And before I do that, I want to explain where you get these and how you get them, because if you're using an on-site copy of the free version and it's a relatively new copy of the free version, we've removed the custom dashboards from the free version. However, if you have a free account on our service, LRS.io, then you'll find this feature enabled. So because the free version that you download for your computer has no restrictions on the amount of data that you store, we have to impose some kind of restrictions for business reasons. So on the downloaded on-site installation, what we do is we remove some features. On LRS.io, the hosted system, we actually give you a storage quota. And so because we sort of control free use via the storage quota, we have all the features enabled, but you just can't have infinite data the way that you could on-site. So if you're on LRS.io and you've got either a paid or a free subscription, you'll see that the custom dashboard features I'm going to describe today are there and enabled. If you have the free on-site installer, you'll see that they are disabled. And if you have the paid on-site installer, you'll see that they are enabled. So sorry, that's a little bit complicated. Unfortunately, we can't just give everything away to everybody for free all the time. I wish we could. Okay. So what we're looking at now is the LRS overview, and I talked about this at length last time, so I'm not going to go into any of this in too much detail. Let me just open up this is the parameter section for each dashboard. What we're going to do is we're going to start by creating a custom dashboard. The custom dashboard is very similar to the default dashboards, except you get to pick which of these widgets are on the page. You can have as many custom dashboards as you like. And each custom dashboard can be kind of configured with different widgets for some different purpose, what have you. There's one additional complexity, which is when a widget is on a custom dashboard, it gets new customization options. So let me start by just showing you how to kind of create a custom dashboard. You'll just open the custom dashboard dropdown and go to New Dashboard. The new dashboard by default has no widgets on it. So you get a couple of little notifications up here and kind of tell you something about what you should be doing next. Let me start by just saving this blank dashboard so we understand a little bit better how that works. What's happening right now is I'm kind of viewing a new blank dashboard. I'm not editing it yet. I'm just viewing it. And you can see there's not a lot to see. We get a little notification here about 0 widgets hidden. I'm going to come back to that. So let me go to Edit Dashboard. And what I'm going to do is give it a title and then save it. So this actually gets persisted to the server. The default title is Custom Reports. That actually tends to be a little bit confusing. So I'm just going to name this Demo Dash. And I'll hit OK. Now you'll note that the sidebar has grayed out. That's because the system has detected that I've made some kind of modification in edit mode to the dashboard, and I haven't saved it. If I were to navigate away from this page without clicking the save button, my modification would be gone. So what I want to do is hit save, and then we'll see that Demo Dash appears in the list of custom dashboards. At this point, the dashboard is persisted to the server's database, right? There is actually saved on the server a custom dashboard called Demo Dash. It's got no widgets on it, though. So the next thing you'll want to do is go to Edit again and add a widget. When you go to add a widget, you get a list of all the different widgets that we have in our system. Actually, not every widget that you see on the built-in dashboards is available on custom dashboards, mostly because some of them really don't have configurability that would be at all easy for us to kind of describe. Let's go ahead and grab something relatively simple. You just browse through this list. Some of these are more complex than others. Here's a little carrot. See this demo default description? That's a plug-in analytic processor. So in the next version of our software, we're really working hard to make the whole thing much more extensible. And one of the extensibility points is new widgets that you can allocate. And this is kind of the demo widget that tests that functionality. That's a place for you to kind of build reusable analytic capabilities and then plug them in and then use them by putting them on the dashboard. Okay, so I'm going to add a widget, and let's do something. Let's do something relatively simple, like activity over time. So this by default is showing us the same thing that's on the LRS overview graph. It's all activity over all time for the whole database. An important distinction here is that when you put the custom widgets on the custom dashboard, they have sort of an edit dialog. Each one exposes different properties that you can set, which kind of change what it's showing you. So when I pull up activity over time, I can scope that in to look at particular things like particular activities or particular actors or particular events. Let's hit the activity and just kind of scope this into just one activity. I'll just pick one at random here. This should, you can type in here to sort of search, but I'm just going to pick that. No data available for that one, so let me pick. Just grab one of these until we find something. There we go. So that's activity over time for, I think it was called reproducible research. We can add another one and just compare them. Activity over time. What was it? Activity over time. And pick some other event, algorithms part 1. Oh, no data for that one either. Let's do. There we go. And so we can compare these side by side. One of the things that you'll notice is the flow of the graphs tends to get a little bit out of whack sometimes while you're editing. That's okay. Once you save the dashboard, it'll reflow itself and kind of fit so it all makes sense. So we can do activity over time, and we can put these things side by side, and we could get the activity for a bunch of different objects. One thing that's important to understand is activity over time is not the same thing as context activity over time. Right? We talked in the previous video about how, a single object can have verbs, but something can have many objects inside of it. And if you wanted to do like, show me all the activity for anything under this value, right? You would do context activity over time. I won't do that now. It's basically the same. But what you're saying is, show me the summation of all of the activity for all objects that claim to be a child of this thing. That's kind of the same thing you get when you go to like course traffic over time, where a course itself doesn't really have xAPI events on it with it as the object, but it is the grouping context activity for a bunch of lessons, and they have completions and scores and things. So what was just happening earlier when I went to say pick something and it said no data available, yeah, those were courses. There are no xAPI events that directly use that as the object, so there's no data available. If I wanted to look at those objects, I should have picked context activity over time. Yeah, so now I've got 2 cards on the table. Let's grab something else that just looks different so we can see what's what. Let me add a widget and go to, let's do verb type, which is a pie chart. Looks different. The reason I want to show you that it looks different is because you can use these little icons left and right to kind of sort things. So I can just, move my widgets around by moving to the left, moving to the right. If the layout engine decides they need to wrap down onto another line, then it would just pop up a line. Let's add another widget. Like, oh, this is good. Let's do the agent overview. So the agent overview, like we talked in the last one, is not a graph style widget. It's a different kind of list style widget. But that doesn't matter. It's got the same configurability. I just have to pick an agent. And then we kind of show this information about this agent. Over here is an example of the kind of layout, but that all cleans up once you save it. And you'll see things reflow and redraw, it works fine. So yeah, and I pulled that up to kind of demonstrate how if I, push the verb type graph forward one, it'll move up and everything else moves down. It all reflows. Like I said before, the system does its best to try to like fill this space with cards. So that's kind of how that works. There's a bunch of different kinds of widgets that you can add. There's an event table. The event table is basically a statement viewer. It's very, very similar to a bunch of different things. I can go pick, objects. The event table actually has client-side pagination, right? It renders different pages. So, let me remove all the parameters so that there are more things, and you'll see that the pagination happens like this. Each one of these modules is its own little kind of piece of software, so they all work a little bit differently. If you want to just take one off the dashboard, you can hit the little X button and just pop it right off. So that's the custom dashboards. You can play around with building kind of whatever it was you wanted to see. Um, Most of the different capabilities of the built-in dashboards are available here, but there's also some things that the built-in dashboards can't do, which is the like deeply custom queries. So we have a couple of levels here where you can get deeper into the topic of how do I want to slice up this data and put it on a chart. What I've done so far is I've taken our built-in processors and configured them to look at different actors, different objects, that kind of thing. But we have a couple of widgets that are deeply configurable, where their configuration options can be used to just fundamentally change what they do. So in that case, you'll see some of them just can't show you anything if they have no configuration. The default configuration doesn't do anything. In that case, it'll ask you, please set the widget up by clicking the icon. It gives you a little preview of the icon. So let me hit that, and we'll look around here. So this is the custom bar charts, and it is powerful and deep, but can also be used with just the user interface without knowing too much. Let me explain how this thing works, because it's pretty cool. It's going to start by asking me to filter the data set by choosing some field from the specification, and let's do object ID, right? And then matching that against some value. Now, these values autocomplete depending on the match filter, right? So in this case, because I said object ID, the drop down is going to give me all the object IDs, right? And when I type to search, it's going to search object IDs. If I do actor name, then I get actor names, right? This covers the whole specification. If I do, I mean, I don't know, what else can we do? Authority, let's do authority name. We don't have any authority names. Let's do authority. Authority account name. Do we have any of those? Yeah, there's Veracity generated and demo. Those are the two authorities that we've used thus far in this database, right? But this covers the whole spec. Context activities, timestamp, stored. Now, here's a little secret. You can put extensions in here. So you don't have to accept things that are off this list. If you want to kind of filter by the value of an extension, you would just do, let's do result extensions. Result dot extension. And then you just type the identifier. The ID is required to be a URL, which can be a bit awkward, but our system just handles this under the hood. Right? So that's kind of saying where the value of result extension, my extension, is something, right? And obviously there's nothing to autocomplete. It says no results found, like I would have to say ASDF or what have you. In the match value, you may also supply a complex object using the Mongo query language. So if I wanted to say, start by filtering on only statements where my extension has a value greater than 10, I would use the $GTE greater than 10, right? So that would start by just selecting statements where my extension's value is greater than 10. You can also say exists true. That says, well, actually, look, capital true doesn't work, but there we go. That says select statements where the extension exists, which is probably fairly relevant for people using extensions, right? But anyway, I'm not going to do extensions for this. I'm going to do something that our demo data set actually contains, which is object IDs. So let's go ahead and just pick, I don't know, Python 4. I don't know that this is going to result in a graph because I don't know the data set exactly. It's kind of randomly generated, but it probably will. We'll see. If it doesn't, I'll revise until it does. So because we're building a custom bar chart, the next thing to do is group all these statements up into bars, right? Each of the groups that gets created is going to be one of the bars. So when we say grouping key, what we mean is where the values of this field are unique. right? So if I did actor inbox, each bar would be the unique actor inboxes. Now, here's an interesting thing, right? Let me just show you a bit of funniness here. If I do group by object ID, I've already matched on object ID, meaning there's only one different object ID in the data set, right? So this would just give me one bar. If I group by verb, let's do that. Let's do that because that will definitely yield a nice graph, right? So this is saying I want to build a bar chart where we're looking at the statements for a given object ID, and we're making bars out of the verb IDs. And what are we going to do with the verb IDs? We're going to count them. So this language doesn't have a count. Instead, what you say is you sum by 1. I'm going to come back to this because it's relevant, right? If I sum by 1, and this one lets me set a title, so count of statements by verb on Python 4. The other two things I'm not going to worry about, and that should yield a decent bar graph. Yeah, that's great. That's exactly right. See how that works? This is saying the verb ADL initialize is used 3 times on the Python 4 object. But so this one's relatively simple because we did count by 1, right? We count verb ID with a sum of 1. Well, let's do something different. The sum 1 is relatively easy to understand. Let's not group by verb. Let's group by actor ID. You guys will note that, do we have actor ID? I guess let's do actor inbox. Let's do actor account name. Let's do that. So let's keep our sum 1 though, right? Let's just do group by actor account name. Each of our bars is going to be an account name. Now these account names look like gobbledygook. So let's do, instead of actor account name, let's do actor name and see if our data set has nice names. There we go. So now we're looking at a bar chart of the count of events on Python 4 by these people. And these are the only 3 people who have done anything. So that's rather interesting. Let's say rather than counting up how many events they had, we want to get their average scores, right? So this is a little bit more interesting. The group operator is a little bit like saying, what's the height of the bar, where the grouping key is the value of the bar. Every unique name makes a bar. The group operator is the height of the bar. So we don't want the height to be kind of the count. We want it to be the average, and the average of what? The average of result score scaled. So let's hit OK and see if we kind of get something. Yeah, we do. This means that all of Eileen Bianca's xAPI statements for Python 4, if you take the average of the result score scaled value for her statements, she averaged 0.9. That's pretty good. She averaged much better than Arlie Kimberly, who only got about a 50% on average. So that's how you can build a simple bar chart over the result score scaled. Now, this actually recreates something that we kind of already have, right? We show you the top students by score and stuff like that. That's not, that's fairly typical stuff that we have built in widgets for. But you can use this to build a bar chart over pretty much any different thing in the specification. And you can use it to build bar charts out of extensions, which is especially interesting. I match filtered by extension, but you could also do a grouping key by an extension, right? So for each unique value of my extension, what was the average score? Or even for each unique actor, what was the average of the extensions, right? All of these things allow you to do result extensions dot HTTP, whatever my extension ID is. So that's really, really, really powerful because that's the only way to get nice graphs over values that are not default in the spec, that are extensions. This limit 4 would kind of say, if there were many, many individual bars, limit them to this number. The default of that, I think, is 10. If I don't put anything in there, I think I'm going to get 10. I could say 100 and get a pretty crazy bar chart that would just show me everything. But we don't have a lot for this particular query. We could probably do a match filter of not set, meaning across the whole data set. Let's look at average scores, not by object, just average scores for everybody. And that actually, oh, of course, I did group by result extensions. I didn't want to do that. I want to do back to score scaled. And here we go. So it looks like I'm getting the default 10. Let's see if we can type like 100. We may limit this to, no, there you go. That's everybody, right? Because this isn't 100. So those are the average score for everybody in the database across all objects, right? Across all objects, because I filtered by nothing. So that's a pretty powerful tool. Let me show you one or two more of the custom bar charts and the custom charts, and then I'll give you just kind of a teaser for the aggregations, which we'll have to do next time. So this one is the custom bar chart. We also have a custom widget where you can do a pie chart. The pie chart is identical. Let me see if I can find it in here. Is it called generic pie chart? The generic pie chart is identical. The parameters are the same. All it does is visualize the data as a pie, not as a bar. We have one that is slightly different. It'll look very similar, but because it visualizes a time series, the configuration is slightly different. Let's do one. Let's do a generic time series chart. Generic time series graph. So let's do this one. Let's, for some object, right? Let's do actor object ID. Let's pick one. Let's stick with this. I guess we did Python 4 before. Let's stick with Python 4. And let's take the average score daily. Let's see if we get something here. Yep. So this is how the average score is changing over time for that object. Again, you could do the same thing for an extension. You could say, take the average of the extension. How is it changing over time daily? And you could do monthly. You could do hourly, but that's not going to show much of interest if you don't have data that is that frequent. In this case, that there's some events in April, some events April 22nd, some events at the end of May. So doing hourly is the exact same graph as doing daily. But yeah, so that's how that works, right? And it's very, very similar. You can take the average value. I think you can take, this would be interesting. Let's do sum 1. I've never done this before, but this would be showing us how the number of statements, yeah, this is the number of statements over time on this object. Let's just do that. I've never done that before. Well, there you go, right? The number of statements each day over this object. So that's relatively interesting. You can kind of click together a variety of different time series graphs by doing that. And by taking whatever the value is. This tends to be most useful for scores, because scores are like one of the few numeric values in the specification. But you might imagine, show me the number of completions over time for some object, right? Is the number of completions for this going up? That could be interesting. Or the number of failures going up over time? That could be interesting. What you would do in that case is not take, you don't want to see the average score. You want to see the daily count or what have you. All of these things really are different user interfaces to building database queries that we attempt to make easier for you to use. But we do have a widget called the aggregation pipeline, and the aggregation pipeline widget has a completely customizable query. You can do whatever you want with it. I'm not going to do this in this video because, we could spend half an hour just talking about this. I will just say you paste an aggregation query here, you paste a graph configuration here, where the query is a MongoDB aggregation pipeline, and the graph configuration is a amcharts graph library JSON config. And we have a little bit of glue to kind of glue those two things together so that you can kind of plot whatever the results of the query are against some graph. If you read the help section on help user manual custom dashboards, it goes into Let me go all the way down here. Here we go. This is where it start the custom graph configurations. You'll see here, we've got a pie chart, but those custom graph configurations will let you kind of like set all of the rendering for those pie charts. You can even do crazy stuff like, multi-ring pies. Now, these examples only do pie charts, but like you can do anything that the graphing library is capable of, like stacked bar charts or, alluvial or whatever. So there's like a whole big API for how you configure those renders, and all of that is from the AmCharts library. We have a different article on learning about like what you can put into that aggregation box, and that article is at Help User Manual Advanced Search and Aggregation, right? Where this is the aggregation documentation. Now, the aggregation documentation is pretty much just a MongoDB aggregation pipeline. We have a handful of kind of special operators and a new one, which is super cool, called correlate, which is kind of above and beyond the Mongo pipeline. But the syntax is exactly the MongoDB aggregation pipeline syntax. And that graph configuration is used to kind of marry up the final output of the document set to some render of a chart. This would be a good one to say like a bar chart where the columns are the IDs. That's what graph configuration would do. But we really don't have time to do any examples of that in this. We probably will put together some decent examples, and then we'll put together a video where you can kind of see that stuff nicely.